Hello everybody, welcome back to another election prediction video. This time we're covering the 2024 Senate map for the month of June 2024. So going into this, we're just going to set up the first few safe states on each side of here. So obviously California, it's not going to be competitive. Washington, Hawaii, there's just a bunch of them here. New Jersey, Menendez pretty much already lost the primary. He's just not running it, and Andy Kim's going to be the nominee. So New Jersey doesn't even have to be competitive here because Menendez is simply not going to be the nominee. Now with the safe red states, there's a lot of them on this map because typically this Senate cycle is usually always pretty bad for Democrats. So let's get into the more competitive races. So starting off with West Virginia, it's an automatic Republican flip, safe Republican. Joe Manchin isn't running for re-election, and now he is caucusing as a independent in the Senate, which is kind of surprising to me. But Jim Justice, he's going to be the next senator of West Virginia. He used to be a Democrat, so it's not a total loss for Democrats that he is a former Dem. Honestly, in some ways, Jim Justice is a bit more left leaning on issues than Joe Manchin is, specifically when it comes to economics. But on social issues, he's a hardcore conservative. So moving forward with the state of New Mexico, I don't really think it's going to be that competitive. I don't think Republicans are actually going to put any funds into this race because, again, it's an incumbent senator. The best candidate they got is just a daughter of a former U.S. senator. I really don't think that would sway any races here, honestly. I think it's still going to be a safe blue state overall. I don't even think it'll go down to likely blue. Virginia with Hung Kao, we could just take a look at the polls because Hung Kao's most likely going to be the nominee. But recent poll shows Tim Kaine up by 12 points. This is a likely an internal poll. Well, actually, no. Republican pollster and the Democratic pollster were together on this one. So I guess that kind of counteracts each other's biases. But we're already seeing Hung Kao not being the overperformer that we saw him achieve back in the 2020 House race he was in, where he made it very competitive. Again, I think he's very overrated, and I think we're already seeing his inexperience on the campaign trail. So I don't think he'll make this race really that close. I think Tim Kaine will pretty easily win Virginia. Definitely will outperform Biden by a few percentage points, so it's safe Democratic. Minnesota with Amy Klobuchar. I mean, the Republican nominee is just terrible. The ones they coalesced around, Royce White, he's just not a good candidate at all, and he's probably going to lose big time in the election against Amy Klobuchar in the past. Let's show you how much he won by. 24 points. So I think she'll easily beat this guy. He's a joke of a candidate, and I think Republicans should just give up on him because he's not going to make the race close at all. Maine as well with Angus King. He frequently easily wins here by landslide, so I expect him to win again by a pretty big margin. Moving on to the state of Maryland, we're already seeing more and more new polls come out showing Hogan down already to Angela Alsobrooks, which I kind of expected. But we're already seeing him start to crater here. He hasn't led in a poll since April. The last two polls that have came out in May shows Alsobrooks leading here. I'm pretty sure one of them is her internal pollster or someone who supports her. But the other poll done by Emerson College shows a 10-point lead as well. So at this point, we're seeing a shift. We're seeing Democrats realize they don't want to hand Republicans the Senate in the state of Maryland. So I have this as a likely blue state for now. But it could even go to safe blue eventually. But I'm being cautious and keeping it in the likely blue column. I think Alsobrooks wins here by about 8 points or so against Hogan. He'll make it very, very close for a D plus 30 state, but he might even lose by more in the future. We have to see. Florida, it's teetering on that safe Republican rating at this point. It really looks like Rick Scott, he's holding his margin with Trump voters in these polls. Some polls he's doing about the same as Trump, and some polls he's doing a little worse. But I currently have Trump winning Florida by 10, and I think Rick Scott, he's probably going to win Florida by 8 or 9, so probably a 9% margin. But that's enough for it to be in the likely margin, but it could very well go to safe because of Florida's extreme right-wing shift over the years. We're going to head down to Texas next. And again, I still think Ted Cruz is very favored here. We could just take a look at the polling here. Allred, he only tied a few polls back in early 2024. Most recent polls are seeing Ted Cruz beat him by a pretty substantial margin. Sometimes it's even over 10 points, but that's probably due to the high undecideds. Other polls show it as like a 5 to 8 point lead for Ted Cruz here. I think Ted Cruz probably ends up beating Colin Allred by about 6%. That's my official prediction for that margin. But that's a likely Republican margin here. So I think we should head to the state of Pennsylvania up next. We have David McCormick versus Bob Casey. Now, Bob Casey in the past, he's beaten Republican opponents by a pretty substantial margin. And we're already seeing him lead McCormick by a likely blue margin in most of these polls down here. There's a few that showed a bit closer. Some even showed it within a under 5% margin, but I still think Bob Casey is going to outperform Biden by a lot, and he's probably going to win the state by about 6% as well, I would say. So that's a likely blue margin. But the race has narrowed a little bit. It used to be like double-digit Bob Casey leads, but now it's within the likely blue category. I think we should move on to Nevada up next, because I kind of changed my thinking on that race. Nevada polls are all over the place. It either shows Trump up with a gigantic lead or a tied race. But in a Senate race, we already see some Republican, people funding Republicans already writing off the Nevada Senate race. And we could just take a look at the polling here. Sam Brown, he's just consistently underperforming Donald Trump in this state. Even in these most recent polls, he's losing by double digits in this state, which is very surprising. But she isn't over 50%, but she's at a strong 48 to 47%. So it isn't tilt blue, it's probably lean blue for now. I expect a few of these undecideds to go with a Republican nominee, but she's the incumbent and she's already nearing 50%. And that's pretty good in a swing state like this. It isn't a red state where getting over 50% is more crucial. But we're already seeing Nevada Senate race kind of pull away from Republicans a bit. So I have this as a lean blue state. Moving down to the state of Arizona, Kari Lake is just getting destroyed by Ruben Gallego. Lately, she's just been losing by double digits to likely blue margins at this point. He's also nearing that 50% threshold in this state. Earlier polls showed it as a lean blue race, however, and again, I don't think she's going to only get 30% of the vote. I think few of these undecideds would go her way, but the rest will probably split 50-50 with Gallego. But at this point, I think Gallego is probably going to win here by a lean blue margin, about 3 percentage points. I think we'll see some consolidation for Kari Lake a bit here, but she's probably going to end up losing this race based on the margin so far. But this race could shift to likely blue with how her campaign is going, just consistently down here. Honestly, Republicans should think about nominating Mark Lamb because at least he polls a bit closer than Kari Lake does. Again, it's probably because Kari Lake is just... I just want to say she kind of has grifter energy based on 2022. She's like constantly trying to raise money to overturn that result. That's just pretty much... She's just a grifter. So I think Arizona kind of sees that at this point, that she is just a grifter, and that's why she's doing so terribly. She's literally only focused on, I should have won my governor's race. It was taken from me, or whatever. Her focusing her campaign solely on that's why she's losing her Senate race by so much. At least with Mark Lamb, he's actually running on something else. He's running on just his policies, which honestly, that's what she should do, but she's not going to do that, and that's why she's probably going to lose. And that's why Trump's not even considering her as a VP pick, because he knows she's a bad candidate. He knows that she'll probably drag him down, and it's just a bad idea for him to pick her. And that's why he isn't, and that's why she's probably going to end up losing her Senate race by a pretty big margin. And I think Republican primary voters are going to be making a mistake not to choose Mark Lamb here, who probably has a way better shot, but would probably still not be favored to win here. Again, Gallego, I think he's a pretty good candidate for the Democrats. He's already raised a lot of money as well. And I don't think Republicans or the RNC is really going to give any money to this race. There's other races they could focus on that are way more important, like in Montana, Ohio, Michigan, I would argue. Not Wisconsin. Again, Wisconsin's sort of pulling away for Republicans at this point. Democrats are starting to run away with it here. Let's just go back to the main polls here. Again, I don't get the hype around Hooved. Eric Hooved is down in the polls by a good amount. He only had one poll where it was a tie back in early April. Lately, the other polls just show a likely blue lead for Tammy Baldwin at this point. I don't get the hype around him. I really just don't understand it. Again, I don't think it'll be a likely blue race. I think it'll probably finish in with lean blue because it is a presidential year. It'll at least be a bit competitive on the presidential, very competitive on the presidential side. But again, I think Hooved will underperform Donald Trump. Again, Tammy Baldwin's the incumbent here. Wisconsin typically likes keeping their incumbents. We even saw that unpopular Ron Johnson as an incumbent managed to win here. And we saw Wisconsin keep their governor in 2022 as well. So again, I don't get the hype around him. I don't see Hooved really flipping this race. I think this is a lean blue race we're looking at here. Let's head on to the state of Michigan, which is a very competitive race. Again, Alyssa Slotkin, she isn't leading by much against Mike Rogers, who Trump endorsed. He's going to probably be the nominee here. But again, she's only leading in like the low 40s here. So this is a race that Republicans are probably going to invest in. Mike Rogers, he's a former congressman, so I do think he's a decent candidate here to run for Republicans. He at least has experience, and like Hooved or Lake, who's just grifting off the Republicans in that state. But again, with Rogers, he at least has a fairly good shot. But I would probably put this race as tilt blue for now. I think whoever wins the presidential election in the state of Michigan would probably win the race here. But, again, we have to look at fundraising. Let's just take a look at the Republican side with Mike Rogers. He raised a fairly decent amount of money. Let's check out the Democratic side. Wow, Slotkin raised a ton of money. Okay, just based off this money advantage, and she's leading by about 2 or 3 points, I think this race isn't tilt blue. I'd probably put it as lean blue. Even though she's pulling in the low 40s, look at that money advantage. That's going to show in the race here. So I have this as a lean blue race. But Ohio and Montana are different stories because Republicans are actually performing pretty good there in terms of money. They're actually not that far behind Democrats. I think they're matching the Democrats' funds in Montana and Ohio. We'll start off with Montana first. Again, Jon Tester has a very big uphill battle. Trump won the state by 16 points back in 2020, so he has to rely on a lot of ticket splitting here. But again, other polls do show Jon Tester leading, but JL Partner shows him down. But with the polls that show Tester leading, he's still not over 50%. So a lot of these undecideds would probably go the Republicans' way here in this state, and it's just a very uphill battle for this partisan lean here. Even back in 2020 with a good Democratic candidate, it was still R plus 10, but that was with an incumbent Republican senator. But I don't know. It's a very tough race for Tester to survive here, and that makes me inclined to rate it as tilt Republican for now. Maybe he could survive. We haven't seen any polls recently out of the state, but I would imagine it would probably show Tim Sheehy gaining a bit on Jon Tester, maybe even showing him in the lead. Very curious what we're going to see out of the next few polls for Montana. But I do expect Sheehy to do a lot better than he was early on. I do think he'll pick up a bit of steam as we go on, and Republicans are doing well in terms of fundraising for Tim Sheehy. He raised a good amount of money, and the RNC's heavily investing in this race, matching the Democratic donations here and the Democratic fundraising in this state. So the RNC is pretty much matching their fundraising money here. Let's just back up. Now we're going to go to Ohio, and Republicans have now officially captured the U.S. Senate with 51 seats. Now we'll take a look at Ohio, which is also an extremely competitive race. There hasn't been a lot of polls since the primary elections ended. Bernie Moreno, he outperformed expectations in the primary, That was largely because mainly only Trump voters really came out for him and Trump endorsed him, so of course he was going to win. But yeah, he outperformed expectations here, so that's something to keep an eye on. And again, I don't think he's going to lose by double digits here. I think he's going to make this a very close race. I would imagine most of these undecideds actually go towards Moreno. However, Brown's still at about 47%, 45% here, so I think he's doing pretty solidly here. And Ohio did show a tendency to ticket split back in 2022. Close Senate race with a landslide governor race for Republicans. But yeah, Ohio was 6 points back in the Senate back in 2022, while the governor's race was pretty much a landslide. So ticket splitting still somewhat alive in the state of Ohio, I would say. So Sherrod Brown, he does have a shot here. He is a very populist Democrat. And that's the type of Dem you need to really run here to have a chance in Ohio. But with Ohio, I think it'll probably go R plus 10 in 2024. I think Trump will win here by 10 percentage points. But still, that's not a 16-point margin like in Montana. The partisan lean is not too hard for Sherrod Brown to overcome that. So I think Sherrod Brown's still favored. Moreno still hasn't led in a poll here as the time I'm recording this video. So I'm having this as a tilt blue state for now. But this state could very well flip in the future, and we should keep an eye on it going forward. It wouldn't surprise me if Republicans end up with 52 Republican Senate seats in 2024. But so far, I think this will be the map. 51 Republicans, 49 Democrats. For Senate odds, I expect the Republicans to probably get the Senate by like a 65% chance they win it. But even if the Democrats get Montana, they also have to win the presidential election to break the tie in the Senate. So just odds are the Republicans probably take the Senate. They at least flip Montana or Ohio here. But odds are in their favor just because of the bad Senate map for Democrats. Other than that, if you're new to this channel, I'd highly recommend subscribing, and thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.